informative webinar. We are pumped to be here with everybody, and if you're catching this online post meeting, we hope this is going to be valuable and helpful to you because that is our goal is to um, help you take radios and your surveillance and your communications and actually be actionable with it and do things with it. Um, Today, we're going to talk about closing the gap on communications on the floor at manufacturing plants. What you're going to expect out of this time is we're going to talk through how to figure out what types of devices are the right fit for you, how to spot coverage issues at your plant, what a safety culture looks like at the plant. And then we're going to end with just some tips and tricks on how to start. Like if you're like, hey, what's a good place for me to start? We're going to talk through and give you some tips on that. My name is Jordan Patterson. I'm one of the sales directors here at Aerowave, and joining me is Judson Jones. Judson, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. Hey guys, happy to be here. Before we kick things off, we wanted to start with a few statistics, some really interesting stats here. Um, most of you guys who are work on a manufacturing floor, most of the time when you think of an incident or something going wrong, you think of like an equipment malfunction or a mechanical failure, or something probably going wrong with a machine. But these stats were taken in 2023 from the U.S. government safety data sets. And what they found was 48% of preventable workplace incidents involve some form of communication failure. So this could be something as simple as maintenance team not knowing that a piece of machinery is still running, or a supervisor not being able to quickly warn an employee about a hazard. Or it could be something as simple as they just don't have a reliable way to alert the team of any type of incident going on. Um, the second statistic gets a little more specific. It's about 25% of those incidents happen because of communication breakdowns between shifts. So anyone who's worked in the manufacturing industry knows that those shift changes is one of the most vulnerable moments in the day. So whether like a machine piece of machinery, there's an issue or there's a safety concern, this may be known by one team, but if that information isn't clearly passed along to the next shift, the incoming team is walking into a situation without the full picture. And in these environments where things move quickly, even a small gap in communication can create a serious safety risk. And then lastly, roughly 89% of these manufacturing injuries stem from human error rather than the actual equipment failing. So most of the time, human error happens because workers don't have the information, the awareness, or maybe they just don't have support they need in that moment. Maybe they didn't know a machine was about to start, they misunderstood an instruction, or they noticed a problem, but couldn't get a hold of the right person fast enough. So this is where communication becomes such a critical safety tool. When your employees can communicate instantly, whether it's across the production line or across the entire facility, they can warn each other about these situations and solve problems before they actually turn into incidents.
Yeah, those are great points, Judson. Thanks for walking through that. And a lot of this we were talking at a high level here. We are prepared to share in this presentation some actual real life examples of how this plays out. But before we jump into that, we really wanted to make it clear that because oftentimes people don't look at a radio and realize, hey, this radio is going to impact my employees' safety. It's going to impact operation efficiency as well as my capital expenses and my revenue. They're not thinking about that. But like Judson just pointed out, so many incidences with employee safety are a result of a lack of communication or a failure in the communication devices or just user error. We have people all the time that they don't even know how to use their radios. And so
That's right.
you're not alone if you feel like that's the case for you. But when people don't know how to use their radios or your systems are not well maintained or well battle tested, employees do get hurt on the job. That puts you down manpower, which can impact productivity. It can also impact you financially in other ways if you're having to pay for that employee's medical bills. It could impact you on damaged equipment potentially if the employee is not able to supervise that area. It does impact the business, and then ultimately it breaks down trust, where you want to build trust with your employees. They want to trust you that you have their best interest in mind. When there's trust, everything works better. The operation moves more efficiently and more effectively. So, Judson, why don't you give an example of uh, from your own personal experience how finding the right device is important. Why don't you take it?
Yeah, Jordan, this one's super common. There's so many different options when it comes to equipping yourself with different types of radios or
Yeah.
equipment. So, like, how do you know which one's the right one? A few months ago, we were working with a manufacturing facility that produced these large metal components for airplanes, and the type of machinery that they were using was so loud that most of them they had to wear these big earmuffs even when they just stepped foot into the building, and they were using these traditional brands of radios that their manager used at his old company, and they were good radios. They were really good radios, but they didn't have any real noise cancellation capabilities that they really needed. So what would happen is their operations would key up their radio and they'd try to call maintenance or supervisor, but the person on the other end mostly just heard background noise, and the radios ended up uh, pretty much only being used half the time because of this. And on top of that, their employees didn't trust the radios because they weren't able to hear each other half the time. So when they could hear each other, they typically wouldn't even use them. Um, so one day this issue, became a little more serious. An operator, they noticed a problem developing with a piece of equipment further down the line. He tried to radio over to maintenance to stop the process before it could cause a bigger issue. But because they couldn't hear anything, the message didn't come through, and maintenance just thought they were just asking about a question about production, not reporting an actual potential hazard. So by the time the situation was fully understood, the machine had already jammed, and it damaged several components to the machine. No one was injured, thankfully, but it forced the company to shut down for like 3 hours of production during that day.
Yeah.
So we ended up coming out, Jordan, and we did multiple different tests with different over the head ear speaker mics, and then also noise cancellation radios. And we also went ahead and just went around the whole site and we did a coverage test to see if there were any dead zones anywhere. And it turned out there were
Yeah.
two spots in the plant where back in the admin office you couldn't talk to anyone because there were dead zones. So we ended up getting them a repeater that amplified the coverage while also we equipped them with the right radios and speaker mics with noise cancellation. So the point is, it's not, every communication device works in every environment. It's not the case. Then the radios uh, they that they had were good, but they just weren't the right for that specific job.
So speaking of what you were just talking about, Judson, on the repeaters and testing coverage, they couldn't talk to each other in certain points. That
That's
is a
right.
big issue. You could have all the radios in the world, but if you aren't able to talk to each other, it doesn't do you much good. It's a useless, piece of hardware at that point. Um, and testing the areas, that is important, and to do it regularly because a lot of this equipment is outdoors and it can be weather could impact it. Things can move around in your operation that could break up frequency and cause disruption to where it interferes with your radio communication. So you want to pay attention to your coverage. So an example of that, we have a large manufacturing plant out in West Texas, and they cover a huge amount of geographical area. Up to 100 miles of line where their team is driving and communicating, and they installed their equipment in a particular area that um, is supposed to bolster the coverage for everywhere, but they put it on top of a tunnel area where they drive trucks back and forth through this tunnel. The problem was uh, when drivers and their team were going through the tunnel, they couldn't talk to anybody. They weren't able to hear. It's because the tunnel was underneath that repeater, which is supposed to make everything um, for you to be able to talk farther wide on a wide area of land. But they were going underneath the repeater, and the signal only goes out, up and out. It doesn't go necessarily straight down. So uh, they were having situations where people were going underneath there, and they needed to be able to communicate with them, just because it could be dangerous. There's a lot of traffic going through a tunnel, and so we had to go in and line up the tunnel and make sure that they had the right amount of devices to also help bolster their coverage inside that tunnel, and they don't lose coverage. Now, that's one instance of that. These can be even potentially much more dangerous situations where we have another example at a steel mill in a melt shop area where sometimes there's big fires, there's a lot of heat, and you have to be able to control those temperatures, and that would require somebody to go underground to help take care of overheating situations. That's a very life or death situation,
Hmm.
very high risk, and you need to be able to communicate with that person. And when you're dealing with high temperatures and low temperatures, a lot of frequency interference can happen there. So that person's life is on the line, and you want to make sure you're battle testing your radio communication with them in case they're in a bad situation and you have to do an emergency evac or need to get them help.
Yeah. I think coverage issues is one of the main things that's overlooked, especially when it's just the status quo. They've been using it for a while, and it's like, oh, the radios just don't really work in this area. We're used to it. But it just takes that one incident to happen where it says, oh man, we gotta get this figured out. And so being proactive rather than reactive in those situations is extremely important. Um, the last one though is this one's actually my personal favorite. And you can have the right coverage, you can have the right equipment, but if your team isn't bought in, if they don't trust the
Yeah.
process, or if they just aren't trained properly, nothing else is going to matter. Your team has to feel prepared and supported in order to start building a great culture of safety and accountability. um, so we were actually working with a data center that they were around the clock. So they were 24/7, 365 operators. And one day, one of their graveyard shift operators got up to use the restroom and he forgot his badge. So he was locked out of the main room. Um, and they had a pretty intricate communication process. So he didn't know how to get a hold of the other departments to let him in. And keep in mind, this was 3 a.m. So I mean, there's not a lot of foot traffic going in and out there, and he was stuck. So the problem is he was not fully trained on how to alert other departments in emergency situations. They were one of our clients, so we started asking them about their current training process, and it was really outdated. He was They were basically just, they had a section in the back of their new hire manual on how to operate the radios. Also, their radio system had changed since then, so it wasn't updated. So no one was really reading it, and also it wasn't
Yeah.
even updated. So we actually worked with them to create a much more accessible training program. Operators could log in and watch short videos that walked through exactly how their communication system worked and what to do in different scenarios. So every operator had access to it at any time. So if they ever forgot something, they could quickly just go back and review it. And the company also started holding weekly workshops focused specifically on communication and safety. And they invited their operators to participate in giving feedback on what was working, what wasn't working, where can we make improvements. And so after this, these employees became much more confident in using the system. The communication between departments improved, and the operators started bringing up ideas to leadership that they hadn't even considered before. So when your employees, when they feel trained, included, and when they feel supported, they don't just follow these safety procedures. It becomes truly a culture, and they actively contribute to improving that culture and recommendations as well.
And in case you were having the same thought watching this as I was, man, taking a radio into the bathroom, that seems kind of risky for other reasons. So don't
Those
worry,
are
everyone. If you're watching this, these radios are very durable. They go through a lot of waterproof testing as well, so they're going to hold up. But you may have to, clean them every once in a while if that's the case. So
that's right.
okay, we're going to leave you guys with this. So five takeaways for you that you can start today. Do it all by yourself. Just start wrapping your arms a little around your communication network and just you know, get a better sense of what's going on at your operation. One, check for dead spots. Get if you use multiple radios, you have lots of different radios in your we call it a fleet. You want to try to test them with each other, test them one to one, and go as to the farthest ends of your operation as possible. Go into areas that have a lot of walling, a lot of infrastructure around it, because the more infrastructure there is, the more that can disrupt the frequency. So just spend some time. It could be a few hours, but at least do it on a semi-regular basis just to test for dead spots and make sure that where you have a lot of activity in certain zones, those are working well. And then use, yeah, real life scenarios while you're doing that. Be in the places your people are going to be in. Be in the places that for emergency protocols that your people are going to be in. Maybe that's not their day-to-day general use, but in the rare case or the emergency case, that's because that's typically when you need your radios the most. Make sure you're testing those areas as well. And then, yeah, regular to Judson's point, regular radio training. Um, if you onboard somebody and hand them a radio and show them a few things, they're gonna forget. That's just the nature of the beast. So do something on somewhat of a regular basis, refresher trainings. Make sure you have at least one person on your operations team that is well versed in the radio, knows it like the back of their hand, so that they can do something, whether it's every other month, quarterly, it's up to you, but plan for it. And then also plan for who's responsible when everything comes crashing down, when you're in an emergency situation. Um, have that written down. If you don't have radios in, we know you most likely have emergency procedures, but if you don't have radios and who's on what channel and who's talking to who, you need to get that written down because
Mhm.
if you don't have a checklist for that when something goes wrong, it can just become even more complicated. So do a review of your emergency protocols and ask, hey, where's radio fitting at in here? And then lastly, routine maintenance. When's the last time you've inspected all the radios that you had? When's the last time you've checked to see even how long your batteries, how old those batteries are in your radios? A lot of times people turn on the radios and like, this radio's broken. No, you just need a new battery. So check that. Yeah, check for the lifetime of the radio. If it's a really old radio, it might be time to get a new one. Maybe there's some radios with broken antennas after being used a lot. That's going to
Mhm.
impact your ability to be used. Check your repeaters. Repeater is a giant antenna on top of a roof most of the time. And like I said earlier, weather can impact those bending, tilting, falling over. They're not completely weatherproof material. So just to inspect your overall operation and evaluate it pretty regularly. We would recommend doing it twice a year at a minimum, just to make sure everything is up to snuff. And all these things, guys, it's a lot. I know it can be, even though y'all are some of the most competent people in the world in the manufacturing industry. But it is a lot. It's not necessarily part of your actual job, but we want to be here to support you and do that. You don't have to go at it alone. All five of these things are things that we partner with our clients at Aerowave to do on a regular basis. So, Judson, any last remarks from you?
No, thanks, guys. Appreciate everyone hopping on. Like Jordan said, if you guys need help in any of this, any guidance, or just want to have a conversation,